Hello, everybody. I remember not too long ago I had no visualization whatsoever. It was just normal to me. And then I remember when visualization started to pop, and it really blew my mind. I had a hard time then, and I still kind of have a hard time now being used to it, used to being able to see pictures in the mind. But I'm sure that this change has come from a number of visual memory activities that I do day after day, week after week, year after year. And I would love to share some of those with you. I've gathered 15 together for you today. If you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And I have a number of wonderful things that I'm sure are going to help your memory palace practice out today, because one of the things that we want to do is use the memory palace to the fullest possible extent. And just imagine what it would be like if you could master it even better than you already have, or just start to master it if you're just new to the practice. So thing 567 is here from Japan. Hello. Domo arigato gozaimasu, that you are here. Thank you, thank you. I hope I pronounced that halfway decent. Always nice to meet people from Japan. We're hoping to actually go and do magnetic memory live in Japan in the very near future. Whereabouts in Japan are you from? As we dive in to talk about some visual memory today. Nothing like water. I love water. It's a wonderful thing, actually, when you drink water, to just take a second to visualize. For example, one of the things I like to do is to think about all the miraculous pipes and people that are involved in getting water into your apartment. Now, that might sound like a weird thing, but if you want to really develop your visual memory, every second you take a pause to just think of what you can do to exercise your visualization is very, very powerful. So when you're drinking water and you just imagine where that water came from, all the pipes underneath the city, and then you maybe think about the waterworks office in the administration of the bureaucracy and all that jazz, and you allow yourself to just think of all those people and then how they go home, they turn on the taps and everything like that. One of the things it can do is help you be really grateful for how efficient and effective modern society is in so many parts of the world. And if you're unfortunate and you're not in a part of the world that is so efficient, you can use your visualization and imagination to think about how you might contribute to making your society that successful as well. In any case, I think of that a lot. And so be grateful for everything. And then just the simplest things, we'll talk about that a little bit today. The simplest things, you can just take a second to allow yourself to start to picture out the way the world works. Now, we're going to talk about this image here that we have on the screen a bit later, but it is a great visualization exercise. And I will be checking in with the chat. So I want to say hello to Charles. Bonjour, comment ça va in Paris? Slits is here from Down Under. Oh, well, I'm here in Down Under myself. It feels like up above, but here we are in Australia. Mosin is here. He says, always excited to see your live show and energy you can emit. Excellent. Thanks for being here. You're in Ireland right now. Well, I don't know how to speak any Gaelic, but thanks for being here all the way in Ireland. And, specifically, let me know, if you're joining us, what are your current issues with visualization, with visual memory? Because I see a lot of people emailing and saying, well, I don't have a mind's eye. I can't see pictures in my mind. I don't really know how to associate visually. I struggle with all of this. And I get it, because I was exactly that way for many years. It's only recently that I even believed that aphantasia or aphantasia was a thing, which is the lack of a mind's eye. And now I only sort of understand it simply because all of a sudden I had this huge visualization. And in case any of you didn't follow that story, I was just sitting there memorizing some cards, as one does, to practice. And I got to the Nine of Hearts, which is Cobra Commander for me. And all of a sudden, I just was in the memory palace where I was placing Cobra Commander, and I could see him. And it was the most weird thing in my life, because I've never seen a mental image that I would call seeing an image in my mind. But I could see him so well that I could reach out and touch him. And this was a very, very odd experience, and it changed everything. And I'm pretty sure that switch happened because of all of the things that we're going to talk about today. Now, it took some time, but I was able to use memory techniques very, very well without seeing pictures in my mind. And, maybe not as well as some other people, but as those who know the magnetic memory method know, it's never about seeing in your mind alone. It's about visualizing things, externalizing things so that you can see it. This has helped people with who are very visual anyway, because you don't necessarily get the same benefits out of it. Well, our colors don't show up quite that well there without that. But in any case, it really changed a lot of the ways that I'm thinking. And in some sense, it's I don't even know how to describe it yet. But in any case, I'm very excited, as usual. And I love that sort of ability for things to change and to improve over time. And then we all know that, things go up and down. We're all dealing with a bunch of up and down sort of stuff. So let's cheer each other on in the current environment. If you're joining us, hit thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Charles says, help me. My images are not very precise. That's what we're here to do today, Charles. So keep your questions coming. When you say, Charles, that your images are not very precise, what do you mean? Please give us an example. You say, help me. Here's the number one way to get help. Start to be specific. Start to translate into words. We have the opportunity now. We're meeting together. Type, type, type. Chat, chat, chat. Get some specificity around this so that we can really, really work together and get you that help, because you've got to be willing to help yourself. So do you like to find solutions to your problems? Let me know in the chat right now. Who here likes to find solutions to their problems? I just want you to start saying yes, so that we have that micro step action. Your brains switch on. You stick with us for the rest of the program, and you are active, you're engaged, you're involved, you're ready to be a smarter student, what I think of as a smarter student, which is SMARTER, serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality. And the reality is if you're sitting there like a deer caught in headlights, and you're like, well, I'm not going to type in there. I'm not going to say hello. That's okay. I have no idea whether that is going to change your life or not. But there are some reasons to believe that if you just start taking action, you get involved, you get engaged, and it's not just reasons to believe, it's scientific evidence. Parts of your brain switch on. The neurons start to fire. The positive and negative ions flow faster through the synapses, which means that you're ready to learn and to be engaged and to engage with others. Because a lot of what we're going to talk about today, if you want to improve your visual memory, you're going to have to take action. You're going to have to take action. So do you like to find solutions to your problems? Tommy Duncan says yes. Ingrid says, greetings from Ecuador. Colin says, my mental imaging is close to nil. Well, we can fix that today, Colin. What do you mean by close to nil? What's the wiggle room there? Give us a description. Barden is here, says hello. Daniel says, I'm excited to learn programming and data science. Excitement. That's what we need. Keep excited. Keep going. Build that excitement. A little wheel of excitement. Growing and growing. Rob says yes. Molson says yes. And Slit says, hey, Anthony, what's a good way of building visual memory into your routine as a brand new beginner? Any exercises to begin with? Stick with us today. We're going to cover that in some detail, some depth for you. So Colin says, I don't see my memory or imagination. I never used to either, Colin. So stick with us, because it's not necessary, but we can get you there. We can, I'm sure of it. Slit says, should memorization training be approached like an athlete with a workout routine? Yes, in some senses, yes. I wouldn't necessarily use athlete. I would use just sort of the path of the master, right? So you don't have to be athletic to be a master. A artist is not necessarily athletic. A writer is not necessarily athletic, but all of these people show up consistently to their craft, right? So the path of the master is showing up in such a way that you will be in a present moment in which you're prepared to execute the perfect move when it is demanded of you. So if you've never seen the movie Ghost Dog, go and watch that. The path of the samurai is to be able to execute any last move, even with your head cut off. That's what we're going for. And so you don't have to use an analogy of an athlete. You don't have to use the analogy of the samurai. But what really, really does help is that you have some sort of idea of mastery and moving towards your goals. So, who exactly here understands what I just said? Let me know in the chat if that is making sense to you, that it's not necessarily about athleticism, but it's a good analogy, but we need to be consistent. We need to show up. So Charles says, my images are not sharp and colorful. Sometimes they are not clear. I don't see images clearly in my mind. So Charles, let me know in the chat why you think that it would be necessary for them to be clear. If you think that it's necessary for them to be clear, please let us know why. I promise you this is an important exercise. It's related to something that you may have heard of, which a lot of people use, called the Feynman technique. But why? Why is that important to you? Why is that something that you identify as a potential barrier? Colin says, I have, however, had some breakthroughs in trying to achieve the vision state via deep breath work and meditation. Excellent, excellent. Samuel is in the house. Hello, Samuel. Thanks for being here. Barden says, is there any way to wake up early in the morning without an alarm? Yes, there is. Daniel says, I have tried to implement memory techniques many times in the past, have not found success. Daniel says, I have failed to find the motivation to follow through and by default fell back to brute force ways of attempting to learn. And John is here. Great to see you, John. Thanks for saying hello. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you're feeling. And are you excited to solve some problems with visual memory? Who specifically right now is excited? Colin says, shouldn't visualization be clear and detailed to be able to explain those visual memories? Great question. I like what you're thinking. No, I mean, one of the things you want to think about is just how much ambiguity can you stand in order to reach a goal? How much pleasure in experiment do you think you have the tolerance for? Experimentation, I mean to say. How much joy do you have the tolerance to accept and invite into your life to play around with this until you make a breakthrough? Let me know in the chat, because this is really, really important. Colin is asking a great question. Shouldn't visualization be clear and detailed to be able to examine your visual memory? Well, who says that it should be? What does clear mean? Whose definition of clear are we talking about? Here's something interesting that came up yesterday and over a couple of days. Someone emailed me and said, could you please give me a brief description of what the magnetic memory method is all about? And I emailed him back and I said, no, I'm afraid I can't. And I said, if you're willing, ready, and able to have a full and thorough description, we help people who are ready for reality, which is that there is no brevity. We're in this for life. We're going to spend the rest of our lives devoted to memory, because what's the point of improving it for tomorrow? We should be improving it for the rest of our lives. So we're going to stick with it, and there's no brief description. There's just the path. And if you want to get on the path, which I suggest you do now, then the question is just how much tolerance for pleasure do you have? Because we are going to spend our lives completely immersed in the most extraordinary and explosive amounts of pleasure, because we show up consistently day after day after day in order to achieve bliss right now. We're not always focused on the outcomes. We have to let go of the outcomes in order to have anything. You have to let it go in order to have it all, because you can have it all as long as you're not all wrapped up in all this sort of stuff. So let me know, just how much pleasure can you withstand? Let me know in the chat. Are you a person who has a high tolerance for pleasure? I'm very, very curious about this. And who defines clear imagery? Really, really interested in this, because I want to know what you mean by clear imagery. Look, I applied these things to biblical Hebrew. I applied these things to everything for my PhD. Well, not every little last thing, but massive amounts of focus and concentration on my PhD. I did it with German. I've done it with Sanskrit. I've done it with Chinese. I've done it with all kinds of things over the years. Done it with a deck of cards, right? I had that breakthrough just sitting there with cards. It never needed to be clear. So whoever said that the images have to be clear, and what does that mean? And why are you making it important? I think a lot of people just haven't followed the instructions. They haven't quite understood what memory techniques are really about. we'll get into this. We'll get into this today. I've got 15 exercises for you. So if you're just joining with us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how things are going, and what's the problem with your visual memory? What's going on? Describe it in detail. The more you get involved with your descriptions, the more you're going to get out of these sessions. And I'd like to know, what are you like when you're at your best? Let me know in the chat. What are you like when you're at your best? What do you feel like? What's that experience of top performance like for you? All right, let's see here. Charles says, the more the images are clear, the more I can memorize and remember them, I think. Okay, so I think. What does that mean, I think? Do you know or do you think? I would suggest that if you were willing to just go with whatever you've got and then start to improve it over time without needing it to be clear, you would find that clarity is not necessarily the answer. So I'll tell you a story about the Nine of Hearts. Shortly after I had this breakthrough, I was on a podcast. And for those of you just joining us, the breakthrough I mean is I used to never see images in my mind until one day I was just practicing with this very deck of cards, and I came across the Nine of Hearts, and then boom, I saw Cobra Commander right in the memory palace. This was a Berlin memory palace, the one that I normally use to practice card memorization in, and it just shocked me. It blew me away. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, these two guys came from Accelerate Strength podcast. They actually gave me this beautiful sticker here, and they interviewed me. They were sitting right in the room we're in right now, and they asked me to memorize some cards for them. So I made one mistake. Guess which mistake I made? Nine of Hearts, of course. Why? Because I was like, oh yeah, now I remember that experience with Cobra Commander. So I completely left aside my normal techniques, and I just said, oh yeah, Cobra Commander, of course. Now he and I, we were close. He and I, we were in the same memory palace together. I felt like I could reach out and touch him. Anyway, you know, it's a bit of a thing. It turns on your monkey mind, but I made this one mistake, and I felt a bit embarrassed about it. But the problem with making mistakes in public is that you shouldn't be embarrassed. You got 99%, right? And it's just mind-boggling to people. And then here you are sitting there, oh, that one card. But the reason why the one card was there is because it surprised me that when Nine of Hearts came up, because I'd had this experience, and then I didn't use my normal, well-practiced routines, which are not visual in nature because I didn't have that visualization. So, in some senses, visualization is something very, very new, even though, let's be clear here. Visual memory, as we're going to see today, is not just about imagery. It's not just about pictures. This is a problem. And I think that one of the things that a lot of these exercises have done have helped me visualize, even though I didn't have a mind's eye. And I still wouldn't say that I have a mind's eye. It comes and goes. And I kind of am happy for it to go. But in any case, let's catch up with our chat again here. But I really want to make these questions compelling, particularly for you, Charles. What do you mean by I think, and why does it have to be clear? And are you happy to have it be unclear for a while? All right, so Mohsen says, I think I make some sense as a mental picture. It's the only way I can write a story. Okay, do you mean a mnemonic story or just stories in general? Reyes is here. Hello, Reyes. You say clarity relates to the statement of it's in the tip of my tongue to the idea that I read in this part of the book, but I can't see it. So, you know, for speed reading, right? A lot of people, they talk about sub-vocalization and reducing your ability or reducing the amount of vocalization you make. One of the things that I've never really understood about speed reading is why you would make images while you're reading when it's so much more effective and efficient to make the images later. Which, if you've seen the note-taking tips that I have for you, I put that link for that in the description below. You'll see that I think there's a much faster way to read that doesn't involve any encoding visually while you go along. And so why not save visualization for later and use a multi-sensory approach like the magnetic memory method? So Mohsen says, tolerance to achieve any goal. Great. That's, I'm assuming you're answering my question about being at your best, and being at your best definitely involves tolerance to achieve goals. Colin says, my aim in learning to develop visual memory and visualization in general is in artistic application. I have a couple of experiences in drawing from things I've actually seen in the vision state. Wonderful. Great. So that's cool. I mean, drawing has always been a weird thing for me. I can't really see these things in my mind. So it's always interesting, but I've improved it. And I think part of the reason why I started to pop and have these visualizations is because of drawing over the years. So Mosin says, there is no brevity and we should be improving memories for the rest of our life. Right on. Thumbs up to that. If you're just joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Mosin says, no brief summary, but a pathway to continue making neuronal networks. Exactly. Colin says, in regards to pleasure and tolerance, I still had creative leeway, but the images I saw were clear enough to know what I'd seen. It was supremely pleasurable to draw that way, though. Excellent, excellent. Ruin says, how can we apply this for studying medicine? Great question. I've got some interesting news around that. But the way that you apply it for studying medicine is you would want to basically learn the foundations. You can get the free course at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT, just as you see down below on the address wheel there. And I would highly recommend that you get it so that you can get the fundamentals. And then if you have specific questions about the application of medicine, do just, send them along. Daniel says, extremely excited and in deep absorption. This is usually in the midst of reading or talking with someone, but the greatest has been while teaching children music theory and introductory piano. Excellent. Well, thank you for your work in doing that. And yes, indeed, we do get absorbed and excited while we are teaching. And we're going to talk about that later, actually. Kai is here. Hello, Kai. Good to see you. Charles says, details help me, in fact, in memorization. Great. Now, the question is, do those details need to be visual? That's the question. John says, hello from the Philippines. I love your stuff. I started learning about visualization. How can I improve my visualization more? That's what we're here to talk about today. Rob says he's having trouble remembering abstract images. Great. What abstract images are you trying to memorize, Rob? Let us know in the chat. And Colin says, drawing things that I'd actually seen in my mind's eye felt completely different than normally drawing from my imagination, which I generally don't see. That's super interesting. Very good. So I generally don't see anything that was in my imagination until that I draw it. And I've got an example from my notebook coming up later of something that I only saw after I drew it. All right, so we're going to talk about visual memory. I'm going to share with you what this is all about later. It's very important. There's an exercise around it that you can join in if you want. And I am very excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. We are going to have a great session. And I want you to think today, how specifically can I help you the best, especially during this time? Let me know what makes the most sense for you, and we'll have something about that coming up in a second here. But I want that to be a thing. How specifically can I help you the best? Now, what is visual memory? Well, at its basic premise, it's things that have been seen in the past, right? Isn't it? At its basic level. So what are things that we might see? Well, words, objects, people, activities, and that probably covers everything, right? Like, what else would you see that isn't covered? Am I missing something here? Please let me know in the chat if I'm missing something about the things seen in the past. And when we think about words, objects, people, activities, I think we can throw in there data, right? Like, data is an object, isn't it? And speaking of data, I did this poll recently about offering a 4-week implementation program. Language learning, memory techniques for language learning won out. And then the second biggest was a guided reading, for example, for the art of memory. And then we had memory techniques for verbatim text speeches. That could be poetry, it could be scripture. And then the next was no particular focus. And then we had memory techniques for meditation. So meditation was the lowest there. That was very interesting. And we're in something like statistical relevance, I guess. Maybe not as much as we would like with 171 votes. But that was very interesting. And I would just love for you to say more to me about how specifically I can help you reach your memory goals, especially during this time. I want to do something very special. We've got a lot of stress going on in the world at the moment, and I would love to know how to be accelerating this service. Obviously, what we're doing here is a public service on these live streams, and there's many ways to do things that are even more intimate and engaging for people if I just know what those things are. So let me know what you might like to see. Anyway, the point here is that visualization and memory have to do with things seen in the past, and data is something that we've seen in the past. And so a poll like this is also part of what visual memory would be, because I can think back and go, okay, so most people said language learning, and now my visual memory is helping me because of the visual layout here. And I could use memory techniques, which we'll talk about later, to remember 42%. Who here has a 00 to 99? What is your 42? Share in the chat. I'll share mine if you like. And on the matter of meditation, for those of you who are interested in meditation, the Victorious Mind is up for pre-order. If you would like to get the Victorious Mind, how to master memory meditation and mental well-being, and get a free course called How to Stop Thinking, please make sure you head on over to Amazon, get that pre-order, send me the receipt, and I will hook you up ASAP with that free course. Thank you to everybody already who's been making it a great success so far. I really appreciate that. And I'm really hoping to help people around the world with this issue, because I went through hell and back, and I still have to do a lot daily in order to keep myself out of hell. So I'm very, very excited to be able to help more people with that, and really appreciate everybody who has been interested and engaged. All right, so we will catch up with the chat in a minute, but I want to go through more about what visual memory is so we can get to the exercises. Keep your questions coming, though. If you're just joining us, hit thumbs up, get subscribed to this channel if you aren't already subscribed, and let me know where you are in the world, how things are going for you. Are you keeping safe and all that stuff? And so visual memory, of course, has to do with short-term and long-term memory. And when we think about short-term memory and we think about long-term memory, there's a number of things involved. And we know that the divisions are not that clear. Science describes things quite nicely, but remember that science is a tool for gathering evidence that confirms or denies hypotheses. And we always want to think about how we're going to be scientific about things. And so when we think about short and long-term memory in our practice, we need to think about our goals. So memorizing a deck of cards, for example, is typically going to be a short-term memory exercise. But if we want to memorize a deck of cards for use in magic tricks, then that's going to be a long-term memory exercise. So we're going to want to use different techniques to reach those different goals, right? So that's very, very important. But generally, visual memory is something that we use every single day, right? So we need it to remember where you put your keys, your wallet, your glasses, etc. Here's a tip, though. In order to be more efficient in everyday life and not burn up unnecessary mental energy, why not just put your keys and your wallets and your glasses just in the same place every single day, right? That's just a simple way to save on energy. When we think about visual memory, though, and its everyday use, we also need it for spelling. We need it for writing. We need it for reading. We need it for reciting numbers to people, right? Because often we will think of our own numbers. And in order to even track where in a smartphone, for example, your family emergency numbers might be, you would have some visual memory component that just helps you find in the device where you need to go to dial the different people, right? So visual memory is involved in all these things. By the way, I'd be interested, is anybody up for, I didn't put it there in that initial survey, but for a nice multi-day memory training on numbers? I've been thinking, a lot of people, they might be having issues at this time. They might benefit from knowing their emergency numbers. They might benefit from actually being able to tell, for example, a medical health professional the phone numbers of their loved ones, because maybe their battery runs out because there's no access to energy, but they still need to be able to recite those numbers, insurance numbers, etc. Who would be interested in a multi-day course all about that would help you in that area with some fun exercises? Let me know. And if crickets, well, then you got to think about yourself. How will not having number skills and those emergency numbers memorized potentially lead to tragedy, right? How will it affect your business? How will it affect your family? How will it affect your personal life by not having those things covered, right? Think about that. I don't know. It's your life. but I hope to help people in that regard, and maybe launch a little mini course about that. All right, so we need these things, though. We need visual memory even just to find numbers that we may not have memorized inside of our devices. We also need them for everyday incidents. So I've told you the story recently that you may have caught or maybe not, about how my friend Ollie was here, and there was a weird drunk guy out front of our building one night that we were getting out into a car to go someplace to dinner. And he was weird, this guy. He was going up to particularly young women and yelling at them, swearing at them, etc. So I called up the cops, and everybody was just blown away by the 3 minutes of visual detail I was giving about this guy, down to the widow's peak, the color of his hair, color of his shirt, color of his shoes, the brand of the cigarettes, etc., etc. And this is coming from a good observation that leads to visual recall. So being able to describe incidents is a huge part of visual memory, and your ability to serve as a good citizen of your community really comes down to how good your memory is. So you got to think, what would happen if you didn't develop this and you could have been the one who helped catch a bad guy sooner, helped get critical details to a medical professional that, would have saved a life. You gotta think about that stuff. What happens if you don't take care of this? Your part of doing your part is to be prepared at the best possible level and be that one individual in your family, in your community, who has the highest possible memory skills developed and ready to go, right? Who disagrees with that? I'm very curious to see if anybody disagrees with that. All right. Now, we're going to talk about visual memory problems that arise in adults, now that I think we have our definition down, and why the definition matters, why that each and every individual amongst us has a duty to work on and develop our visual memory. So let's check in with the chat, and if you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And let's see here. ST09 is with us. He says he can visualize just fine, but still in envy of hyperphantagics. And he's saying, was there research on how monks can maintain highly complex mandala visualization for minutes with full detail? Yeah, that's a good question, ST. And envy, of course, is a path to suffering, so take care with that. But yeah, there is research, actually, and on my Science of Memory and Meditation page on Facebook, I gave a walk through some of the research around that. So if you haven't seen that on Facebook, look it up, and you can watch that video. It's still there for you. Kokillan is with us. How can I memorize new words in a new language? Any idea? Oh, I have lots of ideas. Let's get into that in a little bit. We'll go through these questions at the end. Tommy says, ideas and emotions? Indeed. And Colin asks, have you ever seen interviews with Kim Jong-ji? He said that he grew his visual imagination when he wasn't able to actually draw by looking at things and imagining himself drawing them. But no, I want to see that, though. Colin says, in Indiana here, things are pretty mellow for now. Hope everyone stays healthy. I do too. ST09 says he does the opposite. He places his keys in odd places, and it ironically helps him recall. Might be the attention factor. Well, hey, if you're doing it purposely, then you get no complaints from me. That sounds like a great memory exercise. All right, so let's talk about some visual memory problems in adults. For one thing, people can have the ability to copy notes from a board or screen, but they can also have the inability to do that. And people who are struggling with visual memory problems, they might not be able to copy things down as quickly as others because their brains just aren't processing the letters and the words either on a board or a screen. You may notice that there are differences. You might be better with words from a board and worse with a screen, or better from a screen and worse on a board. But it might not be your eyes. It might not be anything to do with your glasses, your prescription needing to be updated, etc. It can be that you're just having visual memory impairment, right? Another thing that can go awry is what we normally have, which is our ability to recall how things from the past looked. So even without having a mind's eye, I can describe lots of things about how things looked back in the day. I just don't necessarily see a picture in my mind, but I remember, that I had certain stickers on the back of some of my guitars that I no longer own. And I can remember all kinds of visual things like that, right? But this can be impaired in adults. So those are a couple of things. And it can be also that spelling becomes impaired in adults for certain reasons because of visual memory being impaired. Now, before we get into these activities and exercises, I just want to talk briefly about how visual memory is tested. So one of the ways it's tested is the Benton Visual Retention Test, or sometimes just called the Benton. And basically it looks like this. And so this is on Wikipedia. I have the link for you in the description area below. And basically what they're going to do is just show you this, and then there'll be a delay, and then they'll show you a number of different things, and you'll be asked to match which one best matches the original one. So that's one of many visual tests that they can do. But you can also just do a self-test. And so now we're going to get into some of the activities. This is sort of a ghost activity or a 0 activity before we get into our 15. And this is the kind of thing that you normally see at the beginning of memory improvement books, right? So the memory improvement book will come and say, all right, so let's get a list. I've just made this short for our purposes. It's usually 10 objects, maybe a bit more. And they'll say, sometimes they're up to 20, which I think is a little bit ambitious for beginners. But they'll say orange truck, map, pencil, elf, right? And then they'll just ask you to memorize that, which you can do now without doing anything whatsoever. So I would encourage you to do that. Orange truck, map, pencil, elf, without doing anything whatsoever. And then you close your eyes, you block this off, for example, and you then try to recall what those things were without encoding. And I haven't encoded them, and I don't know. I have no idea. Orange, I think, was there. And I remember there was an elf there. I think there was a truck and a pencil, etc. But I haven't done any encoding, and it's not that many objects anyway. Normally you would have more. Map is the one that I'm missing there. Now, here's something that you can do that's a little bit different than the memory books. You can describe each visually without using the word, right? So we could go orange. Well, round, spherical, tough skin, light, reflects off its surface. Maybe it has a navel, that sort of thing. This is a cool visual exercise. And it really starts to help you see how visual stuff is quite different than it seems, because then you could think about its weight and so forth. And then a truck, 4 wheels, bed in the back, antenna, it's quite a challenge to think. Goes fast, about X meters long, etc. Then you can think of a map. In any case, what you want to do is continue to start to describe things without using the word. And this is quite a fun visual memory activity. Now, you can also do it the way that a lot of the memory trainings talk about, which is then to have, some of the classic visual memory exercises and activities. So one of them is the one is a bun or number rhyme exercise, right? So basically, the way that I use it when I use it is 1 is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a bee, 4 is a door, 5 is a hive, 6 is sticks, 7 is my friend Evan. Some people use heaven, but that's kind of abstract. So I use my friend Evan. 8 is a gate, 9 is fine, and 10 is a hen, etc. I'll sometimes use 9 as a pine tree, etc. to make it more concrete. I use different things all the time. I don't use it that much. I haven't used it for years, but it is a very useful thing. And why is it a great visual memory activity and exercise? Well, because if we take that list, then it can be much more interesting. So I've just prepared this for demonstration purposes, but you could stop and think, okay, so orange is wrapped in a bun, right? You can do this with a memory palace or without a memory palace. My preference would be with a memory palace, but it's up to you what you want to do. But my preference would be with a memory palace. And so we would need a 5-point memory palace here, and then you just stick it in an area. Orange wrapped in a bun, maybe a truck is being beat up by the shoes, the map is getting stung by bees, pencil banging on the door, etc., and an elf sticking his nose into a hive. Now the point here is that the number as well, right? So if someone says 5, well, you think, oh, well, 5 is a hive, so that must have been whatever. And you can do this, I think up to 20 makes the most sort of sense. Colin says, I imagined an elf drawing a map on top of an orange truck. Great. So now this is a kind of linking strategy that you've added in as well, which is very good and recommendable. So congratulations on that. We should add that to the final version of this text. So you can do that. And the way linking would work is exactly what you're doing. So, you're doing it sort of backwards here. The elf is drawing a map with the pencil, or you could word it in your mind. Elf has a pencil drawing a map. Maybe he's drawing the map on the truck, and the truck is orange. Although I would tend to, we would see. I would have to actually be doing it in order to think about how I would do it. My preference is usually with the memory palace. The reason why I prefer the memory palace is because it gives you yet another tool of recall, and it's just so trained. And so the more you train with it, the more you're going to default on these strategies that you've built into place. So that's our first visual memory exercise, our first visual memory activity, and it starts with learning the rhymes. One is a bun, you can use, one is a nun, you can use whatever you want. I wouldn't use none because it's my 22 in the 00 to 99 PAO that I have for myself. All right, the second one is to visualize acronyms in space. So how that works is, say you want to memorize something like smarter, serious, mature, and ready to embrace reality, right? So then you could use a memory palace, or just something like a page in a book. You could write it out in a book, and you can think in your mind. Okay, so SMARTER, and then have the definition cascading out of it. Serious, mature, like a waterfall, and ready to embrace reality. That's one way to do it. You can also do fun things like SR, and skip the letters in different ways to visualize acronyms in space. You can imagine visualizing that it's, say, written out on a wall or on the page of a book, and then moving the letters around, which can be a lot of fun. Imagining them rotate around and other things like that. Now, another way to just visualize acronyms is to draw them out. So today in one of my Cosmic Journal exercises, I had an acronym for home. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But just working with acronyms, playing with acronyms, creating them, drawing them, is another way to visualize them in space. And more than visualize them, see them visualized because you've interacted with them. This gets a number of your muscles involved, which connects more with your brain and gets those creative juices flowing because of the multiple connections, the levels of processing, which the levels of processing effect is very, very powerful to engage with and use. All right, the third one is to recall your day in bed. So, imagine you're there and you're laying in bed, and instead of, playing with an app which shouldn't be in your bed anyway, right? You want to just lay there in bed and start with your bed. What happened? What was it like when you got up? What were your first thoughts? What were your first activities? My first activities this morning were just to lay in bed and chant in my mind, and just go through all of it, all of the Sanskrit. It's about 100 phrases. I'm not sure exactly how to count them, but I didn't move out of what's called Shavasana or corpse pose until that I went through all of them, which was really great and helps so much with memory, keeping memory sharp day in, day out, and having a lot of fun with that. And so if you're challenged with visual memory, just ask yourself, how will it feel when you have improved your visual memory, and what are going to be the benefits for you? Direct your attention to the benefits of everything in order to really, really encourage yourself to do these exercises. They're really, really important. They're fun. They're beneficial. Let me know in the chat right now, if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. And how would it feel if you were able to just master your memory and you could absolutely visualize so much better, so that within seconds you can make a new memory palace or draw up an existing memory palace and rapidly get it into use, create magnetic imagery, and encode information within seconds. How would that feel? Let me know, please, while I get myself a drink and pour a new one. And whoa, drink lots of water, people. Keep yourself hydrated. That's a number one tip for the health of your brain. It's very good for your memory. Very good indeed. Colin says, I really would love to know how it feels to actually visualize things at all. Well, Colin, I got there, and it feels weird, especially if you haven't had images in your mind basically your whole life. So I'm still not sure what I think or feel about it. So keep that in mind. But what it feels like is weird. There's no words for it because it's an actual perception of visualization. All I know is that it's sometimes, now that I have it, I find it quite distracting, actually. So I'm not sure that I'm totally comfortable with it, but it's here now. So, just roll with it. All right, we're going to check in with our chat, but let me know how you're doing if you're joining us. Get subscribed if you're new here, and let's carry on with number 4. So the fourth visual activity you can do is dream recall. So still in bed, you can get into a routine of just writing down your dreams and starting to practice recalling them. And you can draw elements of things that you perceived, even without really a visual sense. You can draw things that you may have experienced. And my dreams are very strange. I've never really had a sense of seeing anything, even though I can describe visual things. It's quite an odd thing. And one thing for sure that I've always puzzled over, maybe you guys have had the same experience, let me know in the chat, but I never see faces in dreams. It's the weirdest thing. It's as if people have no faces. And for years and years, I never saw any sort of technology either, like no TVs or cell phones or anything like that. Although recently I did have that once, and it was really, really weird because I just never sort of had that. Anyway, dream recall, there's a lot of detail and ins and outs about it, so get into it. It's a great visual memory activity. Simple way to get started, just write down your dreams in a journal. And one that I recommend, my friend Stefan puts together, it's called the Lucid Dreaming Journal, and we've talked about that before. Very, very powerful tool. Highly recommend it. And that's at howtolucid.com. So shout out to Stefan for his wonderful work that he does. Colin says, is it intrusive? Yes, it is intrusive. And if you watch my interview on Aphantasia Meow, I get into how and why it is intrusive. Colin says, I know that I see vivid imagery in my dreams, including my family and friends and other faces, but I can't visually recall them, even though I know I saw what happened. Just recently started to try and achieve lucidity. So lucidity is weird. I think lucidity has that same surprise effect as when I saw Cobra Commander, when I started to visualize. But yeah, it's intrusive because I'm used to connecting with people and just being right with them. And then all of a sudden this image will come to mind of something else. And then it's just, what? So good thing I have trained concentration and focus. I can get back quite quickly. But it's a bit annoying and irritating. Anyway, I'll be checking in with the chat later. Let me know if you have questions. This is the opportunity to post them in, and I would really love to know what must be true for you in order to, get you to practice memory every day. What do you need to have happen in order to make that something possible for you if you're not already? I mean, sometimes people here, they're just total pros and they're just hanging out. But I'd love to know, if you're stuck, what would need to be true for you? What would you need to have or see in order to get you that encouragement to be consistent, to be motivated? I know that we've got a question here, or we had a comment about motivation that I remember seeing earlier, which we'll get into a little bit later when I review all the chats. But I'd be very curious about that if you care to share. All right. So the fifth activity I have for you is visual meditation. And visual meditation, I've done for years without really seeing anything visual at all. And some of those things have included the memory palace, of course. Then there's something like mandala work. You can certainly do drawings and then meditate on them without having to see. So I don't know if anybody has ever drawn them, but they're very, very fun and interesting. We've talked about that before on live streams. And then shape manipulation. So when you take the free course at magneticmarymethod.com/YT, you'll know some of those shape manipulation exercises. They're very powerful, and you don't have to see images in your mind in order to make them work. Now, in terms of the sixth exercise that I have for you, an activity, is to scan pictures. And when you're scanning pictures, there's a couple of things you'd want to do. So reflect on the space and the location of objects within the pictures. This is very, very important. We'll have an example of this in a second. Then you have depth, where the vanishing point might be. Really work on absorbing what you see on the screen in front of you and thinking through, the nature of that picture and its visual nature. The width and the length. Reflect on these things. And the spaces between objects. And then also the negative space. So one thing you can think about is doing this with the Mona Lisa. So, you can think of the vanishing point and the depth and really allow your mind to wander through there. You can imagine walking into the painting and walking to that vanishing point. Now, obviously, walking towards the vanishing point means that the vanishing point goes away from you. But imagine that you actually could go to that vanishing point. And you can imagine visually that journey, reaching out and touching it and what it would feel like, right? This is a great way to bring together a visual exercise with a kinesthetic exercise, a physical memory exercise. And you'll notice, there's this kind of road there and this water. And, I'm not an art expert, but the vanishing point is pretty clear. And you could just imagine, getting in a boat and maybe heading on over there. And then in terms of the distance between things and so forth, you can just spend some time thinking about, the distance between the nose and the top of the head and the nose down to here, and all of those sort of Da Vinci calculations, right? So half of a half, and et cetera, et cetera. And there's all kinds of ways to play around with that and think of the length. The head is supposed to be somewhat reproduced, I think 8 times throughout the body, and so on. So it's been a while since I took the Da Vinci drawing course, but there's a number of calculations that you can make, and you can reproduce them there just by looking at art. And then, of course, the other thing that you can do is think about the negative space. So as you're looking at a piece of art like this, you can think, that there's this shape around Mona Lisa here. And it's almost like you would just focus on that and imagine that she wasn't there at all. And think about what that shape is. That's a great little exercise to do. It makes one think of that hourglass painting in a sense, which is quite interesting. Think of what other shapes could be there. And that's another visual exercise, is substitution. So what could you substitute here? That can be a great and powerful exercise. Now, another thing you can do is verbalize pictures. And that's where this beauty comes in. So this is something that is a memory palace, as far as I understand, that would help people memorize certain virtues. It's the 6-winged Seraph, and it's quite old. It's very beautiful. It's a composition upon the 6 wings of the Seraph concerning confession. And so, you would choose where you would begin this as a memory palace. And this, by the way, I learned about in the medieval craft of memory, which Mary Carruthers is one of the people who produced this. And inside of the book, you have a reproduction that gives an English version of all these different things. So I won't go through them now, but I'm working on this. And, desire nothing but good, distribute your goods, abandon your will, persevere in these things. A lot of it just maps onto other things I'm interested in, such as Advaita Vedanta and so on. But in terms of visually describing it, you could take something like this, the Mona Lisa or whatever, and visually describe it to people as a visual memory exercise. So you could say, well, there appears to be an angel or a female figure in the beginning. She's got 6 wings. 2 of them are wrapped in front of her. There's these 2 people here that are holding some of the ribbons and so on. And just by visually describing it and then hearing someone else visually describe it, you're exercising your visual memory, because we know that short-term memory and long-term memory are all involved in this. And then later what you can do is call back and reflect on that exercise and think, oh, did I miss anything? Oh, I forgot that I could visualize what the colors were. I could talk about how the colors were quite faded, and yet they were still quite prominent given how old it is, etc. So that's something you can do. You can also, as the 8th visual memory exercise or activity, you could draw a story from a book. So if you're reading a novel, you can take some time and just seize on a scene from the story. You don't have to be a great artist or anything like that, and just draw it out. And that's a great exercise, because in this case, you may not have seen the characters. It may be an illustrated book, but let's imagine it's a book with no illustrations, just a novel, and you've never seen the characters. I was rereading Don DeLillo's White Noise recently, and so I can think of some of the characters there and just draw them out. So there's a scene with the most photographed barn in the world. All I would need to do to complete this exercise is draw the most photographed barn in the world and these two characters standing there talking about the nature of the modern world, looking at the most photographed barn in the world. It's a pretty hilarious scene if you know White Noise. All right. Now, you can also, as an extension of this, draw a story from your life. And that came up actually for me this morning as an exercise as I drew this image, which is right here. And that's where I also did the acronym exercise, because I visualized an acronym. The exercise is from the Cosmic Journal, which I highly recommend. I've been working with it a lot, and I mention it in The Victorious Mind. Cosmic Journal is an absolute gift and a joy and a pleasure to work with. I happen to have a very limited edition copy from Yanik Silver, but you can get, I think at cosmicjournal.com you can still get some of these. But in any case, for people who have this, he's been doing some live implementation sessions, which has been great. We're on day 10 today, and the exercise had to do with home and thinking through home, and the acronym that came to mind was Happily on Mount Empty, which is something that I really like to reflect on. Emptiness, the present moment being just what it is, and settling into it and enjoying. All right, so that's another exercise, and again, it's visual because I'm taking a story from my life, an episode from my life, and visualizing it very nicely. Well, nicely in terms of the outcome. I don't know if it's great art or anything like that. This is a semicolon, and it's on fire, and so on. And then the idea of home and reflecting on that. It gives you visual memory of your life because it's biographical. It helps you work with iconic imagery and express yourself through some sort of art therapy. And then you can add words, which gives you also a visualization of the language. We know that visual memory has spelling involved. It has all kinds of things involved related to reading and writing. So you're exercising multiple levels. Now, the 9th exercise is to teach others. And look, figuring out how to explain something stretches your mind's eye, even if you don't have a mind's eye. It's very, very good exercise. So I always say, teach these memory techniques. Teach them so that you're able to understand them better. And when you visualize how someone else understands something, really work on thinking about it. I'm always asking questions. Hey, how can we do this better for you all, and so forth, and trying to encourage you to engage so that I can learn how to teach better and visualize what it is that you need and how to help. And we've got some chats here that are all involved in that, and hoping to go deeper into that. It's going to help you so much. Whatever it is you're learning, teach others. It really stretches your visual memory and it helps you improve it. Now, you can also, as a 10th exercise, study resemblances. So there's some interesting research that people really do choose pets that sort of look like them and so forth. Now, you don't have to go around looking for memes on pet owner resemblances, but it's one way to do this, to find pictures of owners with their pets and just think about how they may look similar. If they look similar, how do they look similar? And play a game with that. So I'm sure you can see that there are some similarities here in this picture. I don't actually know that this is the owner of this dog because this is stock photography, but I think that it probably is the owner, and it is just something that you can do in everyday life, is look for resemblances, visual rhymes, so to speak. And there's many, many ways to do that. For example, when you look at art, and someone like Andy Warhol is good for this. He's constantly making references to other figures, celebrities, and so forth. Picasso is very, very good at this. Constant references to classical figures and so forth, and from other cultures as well. Another exercise, the 11th exercise for you, is visual memory activities. You can doodle, and one of the things that we talk about is doodling as part of note-taking. So if you haven't seen the note-taking tips session, check that out. There's also visual memory activities and exercises, visual games like Kim's and card matching. So on the matter of card matching, some years ago, I was able to give a bunch of these away. I had a bunch given to me from a company, and so we had a contest and gave a bunch away, and I still have some, like the Make a Face memory game. And all this is a bunch of cards. There's 2 sets of each, and you lay them all out. You mix them up, lay them all out on the floor, and you just play a matching game. So there'll be 2 of these, and then you put them like that. The backs are all the same. Lay them all out on the floor. You flip over one, and you go, oh, there's that one. And then you try to find the other. And then, of course, you have to turn this back over so that you're not cheating when you find the other one. And then when you are able to make a match, then you're able to remove them from the game. And this is a very nice game because the images are very, very beautiful. And there's another version that I have, which is the street art memory game. And these are a lot of fun. Now, there are apps that will do this, but I recommend that you get actual physical things because we know that visual memory has a lot to do with space and spatial orientation, which is going to be our 15th memory exercise for you today. And you want to, have that out in space. So these are street art things, and obviously these would not be a match. But by not having this locked up in an app, you're able to exercise your actual physical visual memory, where things are in the room with you, in the space with you. And this one I like a little bit better because it has some of these art that's similar, but it's not the same. And this can be really challenging because you go, oh, I saw that pixelated thing, but it's not the same pixelated thing. So that's quite a bit more challenging than this Make a Face memory game, I have found, because these faces make it a little bit more clear, but the street art memory game is a bit more obscure. So I recommend those. If you don't have them, we may ask if we can get some more of those for a future contest, but we shall see. All right, so that's a game for you. And then a 13th exercise activity for you is to relate concepts with images. So a lot of people, they ask me all the time, they say, oh man, I just can't memorize concepts. I can't come up with magnetic imagery for concepts. It's really, really hard. And so one thing you can do to help with that is just relate concepts with images. So get a list of concepts and then start to work at it. So, and Justice for All, Metallica would be a great mental association for justice, of course, right? But it's also another metaphor for like the public, the community, right? Because justice for all, there's that word all there, and all combined. So you can dual purpose things, and then once you make an association, you can think, what else does this represent? So the public at large it represents, and then you can go further. Well, it's an album cover, so that represents music, but it also represents the concept of genre, right? Because this is music that exists in a particular genre. It's not classical music. It's not country and western. It's heavy metal, right? So that's important. The 14th exercise I have for you is to make association part of your everyday life. So just as a quick example, whenever you see numbers, just think of what associations come up, like Friday the 13th, or 13 you see, and then you go, oh, Friday the 13th. Then, 33, people say Jesus died when he was 33. Marilyn Monroe apparently was in the 33rd casket. I have no idea, the freezer in the morgue. I have no idea why that, I know that, but or if that's even true, but I read that somewhere. And then you can just make rhymes. So you see 28 for some reason. You have an appointment on the 28th. You can just quickly go, well, 2 and 8 make a date. Or they go on a weird date as a little bit of a rhyme. Now, for a next level thing, learn your number systems. Make sure you know a 00 to 99. Make sure you know the major so you can build one. Make sure you at least spend some time thinking about the Dominic system, maybe employing the Dominic system. And yeah, there's many, many things to do that you can play around with. You can have a number shape system. You can have the number rhyme system that we talked about earlier today. But have that so that instead of going, 28, 2 and 8 go on a weird date, you just simply go 28. Oh, that's my character from the Navy G.I. Joe toys, right? So that's a lot of fun. And finally, be in your memory palaces. So one of the things that we can do is we can have remote memory palaces, and then we can have memory palaces that we inhabit, that we live in. And then we can actually walk around memory palaces as a visual memory exercise. So I remember when I used this memory palace during a tour to memorize some lyrics, and I did an experiment touching my hands on the walls and stuff like that, and I was in the memory palace really focusing on matching the visualizations with the location. And sie hat uns nicht gefragt, als wir nach kein Gesicht. And just actually standing in that place to memorize. So basically what you would do is create a memory palace out of the room that you're in, pick something to memorize, and then stand there, encode, and then just visualize it being there as if it was really there for you. Now, this is a bit of a challenge, but it's a great one to stretch. Just eyes open, stand there, and think about your magnetic imagery, right? It's very, very powerful as you do that. And it's one of the things that I love to do the most is actually be in a room and think, okay, the image is right there. And you will see why you don't need to visualize in your mind when you do this. Because really, so much of what you're doing is multisensory. It's not at all just its thing in and of itself as if it's seeing pictures in the mind. It's many, many other things. All right, so that is our 15 visual memory activities and exercises. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to check through the chat. If you have any comments or questions before we go, pop them in. And if not, I hope that you'll use some of what we talked about today to improve your visualization. And I think there were some questions that needed to be answered, but we can always pick them up the next time as well, in case I can't spot them all, or any of them for that matter, because my own eyes sometimes fail me. All right, I'm not seeing anything that we didn't catch up. Oh yeah, Kokelan, how can I memorize new words in a new language? Very, very simple. List out those words. Make sure you have memory palaces all strung up together, and make sure that they are ready to go. Start with your first word. Start to encode just in the ways that we were just describing. I think that was all that I missed. So without any further interaction from you all, let's call it a day. Thanks for being here today, joining us. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet gotten your pre-order of The Victorious Mind, head on over to magneticmarymethod.com/VM to grab it. I've got a free course for you that is called How to Stop Thinking. Just send in your receipt and I'll send it on over to you ASAP. And I appreciate people who have been getting the pre-order. Daniel says, is it possible to develop the memory techniques to be direct descriptions of the material we want to learn? Okay, Daniel, thanks for that question. Is it possible to develop the memory techniques to be direct descriptions of the material you want to learn? Daniel, please give me an example, and please be quick with that example, unless other people want to jump in and start asking any questions, because I'm wondering and very curious what is the material you want to learn so we could potentially answer your question. When you're asking questions, just as a tip, try to include examples of what it is that you are you're doing, because I'm very curious about how to help people further, but there's often just a mystery to to what it is that's being asked. So for example, you want to learn a programming language. Great. So what's an example from the programming language? The way to do this, Daniel, first of all, is to make sure that you're 100% in. You have a vision. You're going to nail this, right? So for example, you want to learn a programming language. You want to have memory techniques to help you. Well then, how do you learn memory techniques? I've never found anybody who disagrees with this. You start by learning how memory works, and you have one teacher that you follow, ideally for at least 90 days. Obviously, there's many teachers. You want to have as many teachers as possible, but you really sink in to one thing. Doesn't matter who it is necessarily, as long as you devote yourself to one thing and you spend enough time with it to actually learn it. And that's how I would start. So if you're going to do the magnetic memory method, we start with the memory palace. There's reasons why we start with it. Some other people might start you with linking. Some other people might start you with the major. Whatever it is, pay it its due if you want to get into it. And if you don't, then don't. So you're saying you want to learn a programming language as opposed to learning a separate system that then maps indirectly to the material. Sorry, I'm not really following what you mean. But if you mean that you want to develop memory techniques in a way that enables you to not learn memory techniques, I'm not sure what that is. I don't know what it means to map indirectly to the material. There may be things that I don't know about memory training and memory techniques, which is totally possible, which is why I show up every day and learn more every day. But I really sort of don't know what you're asking. So, you say you're sorry for not being clear. Now's your chance. I'm going to stick around. What's the worst thing that could happen by just diving in with memory techniques as they are, without trying to change the memory techniques, without trying to find some other path to making the memory techniques work? What's so wrong and damaging about just following the thing that has worked for thousands of years without trying to find an alternative? I'm very, very curious. So many people, they rather than following the fundamentals, they go into all kinds of, well, what about this and what about that? Isn't it the case that so much progress is hindered when people try to reinvent the wheel? They try to find some alternative instead of going with the fundamentals and what works. Remember, I started today's session with how much bliss and pleasure can you withstand? How much rapid learning can you imagine yourself inviting into your life? How much joy can you possibly withstand being the thing that you take into the future? And if there was a miracle that was going to happen so quickly in your life, what would it be? And how do you think that memory techniques would help you? Well, I'll tell you exactly how it happens. You dive in, you learn the foundations, you learn the fundamentals, and you stick with the program for as long as it takes to get the results, and you stay with memory training for life. This is not this sort of parachute in and then take off sort of thing. Nobody gets the black belt after, just looking around, kicking the tires. No, you stay in that dojo for as long as it takes to get the black belt, and you seek the counsel of whoever it is that has what you want. And so you find who that person is. And there can be many, many teachers, but they're not really your teacher until that you've spent enough time to actually verify and validate that you've learned something from them. And so we have this problem on the internet, which is that it's enabled grazing, it's enabled collecting, it's enabled jumping and skipping and all that sort of stuff. And I would recommend that if you want a miracle to happen in your life, you need to stick with an individual teacher. When my friend Ben told me about Gary Weber that I talk about in The Victorious Mind, which I encourage you to get, I committed myself to reading every single book I could find by that one guy and doing everything that I could that one guy teaches. And I spent 2 years devoted to this. And then I wrote The Victorious Mind to explain what his memory training, because ultimately that's what he's doing, is memory training, right? At least that's a huge aspect of it. And I got an amazing result. Why? Because I was willing to buckle down and focus on one thing for the long haul. Now, I also bifurcated it, split it out amongst a couple of other things. Like I read James Schwartz, for example, and I read a whole bunch of people. I found all kinds of people, Greg Good and Shinzen Young, and I read all this other stuff and it was helping feed this, but while sticking with the one teacher, right? So I would encourage you to dive in and stick with one program for at least 90 days. I'm doing a program right now myself that is, I've gone past the 90-day mark, and it's just been amazing and wonderful, and it's a challenge, but minimum 4 times a week working with that program, staying the course, staying the course, staying the course. It's opened up so much. Absolutely powerful. All right, so ST909 says, very good thinking. I wasted a lot of time scatterbrained, running around looking for something magical. Also reminded me of Seneca's letter on learning from one master at a time. Oh, I didn't know Seneca talked about that. Thanks for mentioning that. I'd love if you would email me that letter or that link in case I can't find it, because I'm not sure if that will come up on Google. Seneca, one letter at a time. Sorry, one master at a time. I'm going to look that up. Daniel says, and I appreciate that, SD09. It's exactly the case. Yes, we need multiple teachers. Yes, we want multiple teachers, but you got to pay everything its due, right? I think all the time of university, how precious it was that I was able to go to university before the internet really started spinning its wheels, because I became a devotee, so to speak, of my professors. I didn't just take their courses, I read their books. I was so honored to be able to become the research assistant of one of my favorite professors named Ian Balfour and work on one of his books. I think my name is even in that book. I worked on it. And oh man, it was so amazing. And just read his stuff, read his book on Northrop Frye, read, and be in the class and just like be really deeply connected to those professors. When they had a book, I went and read it. And it was amazing for me being able to learn more from them because of this devotion to singular teachers. And, you're only allowed, I remember going to university and asking for permission. You had to ask permission to take an extra course load. Probably still do. And they would say, yeah, okay, 2 max. And I'm glad they had that limit, because otherwise I would have overdone it. And I did overdo it a lot. But it's still inside of that. When the teacher had a book, I would read it and really get to know not just what they were talking about in lecture, but what they had committed to paper themselves, what they had spent years studying and spent years writing sometimes just to get out a book. So, yeah, if you want to see an example of that, The Victorious Mind, the pre-order is there now. Send me the receipt. I'll send you an additional course to tide you over until that it comes through. That's at magneticbrainmethod.com/VM. And you'll see, I spent a lot of time working with Gary Weber's teaching, and I'll still continue to spend time. I hope he writes more books. And, it includes watching his YouTube channel. Oh, it is just, one of the things that he says in Happiness Beyond Thought that's so precious, I hope you understand this. It's not just that you spend time, I'm saying, spend time with a singular teacher, but he also makes this very important, and I hope it leaps out at you if you ever read Happiness Beyond Thought, and I hope you read Happiness Beyond Thought. You can never reproduce the teacher's journey. And you should never make that the goal, right? Because we often, I wish I was like that person, or I wish I was like that person, or, that person did this, I'm going to do that. You can't actually reproduce the exact thing, right? You do have to create it for yourself as you go through it. So that's a very, very important thing. All right. So, yeah, basically, when you read Victorious Mind, it's not about you reproducing exactly what I say. It's about you understanding the principles that underlie things so that you might find your version of the journey, right? And there are going to be things that are pretty much dead on. There's going to be similarities, but you are you have your past, you have your genetic profile, all these sorts of things. So you've got to always understand that there's wiggle room and there's you room, but and I talk about how to think about this in the book. I go quite into deep ways for you to integrate it into your own life. And it provides visual memory exercise as well, because you get into some journaling, you see your own handwriting, but you work it out, you figure it out, you find the path, and you really ultimately understand that you're the guru, you're the teacher that you're seeking. You always were, you always will be. And it's just so important to understand this. All right, Daniel says, I respect what you're saying. In fact, you mentioned Advaita Vedanta. And although I have been very influenced with by talks with Ramana, I practice Zazen with a Soto Zen Buddhist priest to stay specifically to one path. Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, I mean, I believe you spelt Advaita Vedanta correctly. Looks right. It is kind of weird because from what I understand from my Sanskrit studies, Advaita is how most people call it, but actually it's Advaita. And same thing with Bhagavad Gita. It's commonly pronounced Bhagavad Gita, but it's Bhagavad Gita. I'm not so precious about these things, but when you know it, you just kind of want to use it, right? And then probably somebody will say, well, actually, it's something else. And then you go, oh, and then you know, whatever. And I think the better thing, the more fun thing, is to have multiple pronunciations in your head and be able to sort of, well, it can be this, it can be that, sort of navigate them. Mental rotation, good for your visual memory. So, you know, Zazen is also great. There's all kinds of wonderful, wonderful variations out there. They seem to come to the same thing in the end. And so I admire you for sticking with one path and, you know, paying it its due. But as Weber talks about in Happiness Beyond Thought, everything is a boat. Not all sized boats get you to the same islands. So if you ever decide you want to go to a different island, you might need a different sized boat to get yourself there. So then you have to decide, well, is this the right boat that's getting me to the right island, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to switch that out. Sticking with one path is not necessarily admirable in the end. I don't think you should break yourself over the wheel just to say, well, I stuck with one path and now I'm proud of myself. And that's why I say to you, at least 90 days, not eternity, right? Because 90 days, there's good reasons to believe why that's a bare minimum. And it's especially important in habit formation neurochemically, just due to the role of dopamine and myelin and norepinephrine, et cetera, in the brain, and the, you know, integrity of the neural networks and so forth, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a neuroscientist, but this is what I've read and have memorized from good things. I talked to Boris Conrad the other day, and that podcast might come out this week. And it all seems to be totally coherent with what he has learned and understands as an actual neuroscientist who does memory competition and has Guinness World Records, etc. And it was a very interesting discussion that we had. So it all seems to be the case, what I'm saying there. But nonetheless, check it for yourself. There's many, many wonderful books to read. David Eagleman's The Brain is incredible for that. Daniel says, just as you are suggesting, I respect the suggestions you are making. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your questions. You had said something about programming language C is close to the machine, and for some reason this easily sticks in memory. But today, I was working on loading a web scraper into a data frame and cannot seem to remember, even though it was very recent. Yeah, so I'm not sure what really still you're getting at, but if you wanted to memorize that there's a programming language called C, right? Or that there's a program you can use called R or whatever, close to the machine is something you could do because C and the word's close, right? But I think you're going further away from the most direct possible thing, and certainly not a very visual thing, than you could, right? So when I learned about a program called R, which Jonathan Ng talks about on his YouTube channel, he's in the Magnetic Memory Method family, I've been on his YouTube channel, I didn't think of a word like, if I'm understanding your example, which, you know, forgive me if I'm not, but instead of saying, well, running to a program called R, data visualization program, or whatever, you know, however you would call that program, instead of using a verb or some sort of descriptive like that, I'm going to go into my memory palace and I'm going to think about, like, I don't know, Rick, my friend, or I'm going to think about Rick Astley, never going to give you up, right? And I'm going to then have those things. Those are things that I've seen. I've never seen close, right? I mean, there is such a thing as close, but when have you ever seen close compared to your friend Rick or Rick Astley, right? Everybody who has used the internet in the last 10 years has clicked on a video and seen Rick Astley. Is that his name? I think that's his name. Never gonna give you up. Right? So that's the way we use these techniques. And so I think the indirect thing that you're doing there is the hard and annoying and lame and frustrating way to spend hours and hours and hours with memory techniques, whereas there's a much more direct path. Now, hard, annoying, lame, frustrating, why did I use those words? I'm using my visual memory right now to go back to an acronym. So we need to build this into our final version, Jessica, is this. There's a guy named Joe Polish who talks about things being half, right? Hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, right? As opposed to ELF, which is easy, lucrative, and fun. We had an ELF today, didn't we, if memory serves, in one of our examples? So if there was a miracle tonight that you were able to just make a change in your life in how you're using your visual memory, I would make the switch from half memory techniques to ELF memory techniques. So instead of hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, easy, lucrative, and fun. Lucrative, in this case, maybe is a bit of a weird word there, but we can throw in another acronym since we're having fun. My friend Damian Patterson here in Brisbane, he likes to talk about luck. Learn using correct knowledge, right? So if you want to learn using correct knowledge, you have all the luck that you need in the world. Now, when I think of my visual memory, I'm thinking of where I saw that acronym in the pages of one of his books. And I'm thinking through, as I recall the acronym, just the actual lay of the land. LUCK. Learn using correct knowledge. Beautiful. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So if there was a miracle tonight, all you have to do is make sure you get started with the magnetic memory method. If you'd like a free course that will exercise your memory, get the victorious mind at magneticmemorymethod.com/VM. That'll take you over to Amazon. We're doing a lot of stuff this month to pre-promote the launch of this book, and I think it will create some miracles in your life. It's a memory training that gives you some visual exercise, to be sure, and I hope it helps you out. All right, so thank you, Daniel, for extending our session there a little bit. If there are any further questions and comments, let's get them in fast. And I'd just be curious ask yourself now, you don't have to type the answer or not, but how would you feel if memory was no longer an issue for you? What would be the result if you could just finally have this nailed? Instead of it being hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, how would it be if it was just easy, very, very lucrative, because you get all the bonus points and the coins raining from heaven of accomplishment, and just absolutely fun each and every moment? How would it be? Daniel says it would be absolutely amazing. All right, 80-20 rule in effect. So I think that it will be absolutely amazing. And so I highly encourage you to take these 15 visual memory exercises, put them into action, and report back. Let me know. Come back to this. Leave some comments on the discussion after. If you were joining us here today and you haven't hit that thumbs up yet, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world in that discussion later on the replay version. And I hope you all get these techniques sorted for yourself. Just keep doing the exercises and you will get there. You will get there faster than you can imagine. You just need to be consistent. So thank you again, everybody. And until we have a chance to speak again, visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye. And challenge accepted from John. Excellent, excellent. I look forward to your update on that challenge. Take care. Bye-bye.